Exciting day on Believe in Chargers, brought to you by FanDuel with the great Lorenzo Neal, arguably the greatest fullback in the history of football, should be in the Hall of Fame. What a day to have this conversation with you, Lo, a man that was an essential part of the most dominant ground game of its time, leading the path for LaDainian Tomlinson. Marty Ball, obviously a little bit of a different approach to run game than what Mike McDaniel runs, but you're talking about one of the brightest, if not the brightest. You know, his name is in the same conversation as Ben Johnson, as Sean McVay, as Kyle Shanahan when it comes to offense. The pelts are on the wall, had the number one offense in 2023, had a almost 5,000-yard passer in Tua, and now it's not official as we do this podcast on a Wednesday morning, but it's expected and it's basically official. The Chargers reportedly have called other candidates and said, we're good. McDaniel has reportedly called other head coaching opportunities and said, I'm good. So it looks like it's going to be Mike McDaniel with Jim Harbaugh, and that is Justin Herbert's future. And man, is it exciting.
It's got to be the happiest guy in the building. Is going to have to be Justin Herbert, because now you're going to get a guy that is offensive minded, strictly offensive minded. You saw what he did with Jimmy Garoppolo, and Justin Herbert we know is far better. You saw the success Miami Dolphins had with little Tua, what kind of quarterback he became because of this system. Players make plays, but also coaches make decisions that determine outcome of the game. And this guy is an offensive guru, offensive mind savant. This is going to be a great fit for the Chargers. Hopefully they can let the ink dry. Hopefully this is a done deal. Hopefully we don't hear something come out tomorrow that he didn't take it, because I'm telling you, that's what's missing. We know that's what's missing. In the playoffs, that's what's missing. That's what's missing during the year, a consistent offense. So now if you get him, there's no excuses.
Lo, it's a great day to have you talking to the Charger fans. They're excited, understandably. The defense has been dominant the last 2 years, and unfortunately the offense just was not able to match that production, and ultimately that's what did him in the playoffs. 15 points combined in 2 playoff games, the most recent, a 3-point performance against a team that did not have a dominant defense whatsoever, although they did play really well against the Texans last week. The Patriots are in the AFC Championship, so you can't not tip your cap to that defense. But just kind of walk us through, because obviously we know Jim Harbaugh, we talked about it, tight end with his hand in the ground, fullback, run power, God's play. That's what he's done. Roman's been with him every step of the way, everywhere he's gone, save Michigan when he won the national championship. Sharon Moore was the guy that was kind of running things out there when they won the championship. But, you're a guy that played in power. You've talked about Mike McDaniel with Kyle Shanahan in 2021, and he's obviously part of that crew. For those that don't know, I'm sure most of you do, but McDaniel was part of the Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur, McDaniel. That was, the big four, the football quartet under Mike Shanahan in Washington, and then Jay Gruden. And he was kind of the run guru. So you got to see him in action as you do some work with the 49ers. Talk about marrying these schemes and his stretch zone, his outside zone, and all the motions and the bunch formations and what he does with that style of run game, as they're probably going to merge it a little bit with a power run game that Jim Harbaugh likes to run. Kind of how would you describe, what McDaniel does, what Shanahan does compared to what Jim Harbaugh wants to do?
Well, I think, believe it or not, everyone says, oh, McDaniel's just going to spin the ball all around the field. That's not his makeup either. You remember the game when they played, in the NFC Championship game, when you're playing against the Minnesota Vikings, they ran the ball 43 times, and only Jimmy G threw the ball 8. So McDaniel is a guy that will run the ball. The differences of what this 49ers offense and what McDaniels has done and what he does great is you got to cover every blade of grass if you're a defender, because of the fact he gives you so many looks and so many sets and so many motions, so many gadgets that you got it. You take your eyes off your work. It's a big play in the run game. You'll still see him. He did it with Juszczyk. You see him do it even in Miami. Go 2 backs, but they mix things up. And it's a very, very, what you see is not what you get. That's the difference. They don't line up and say, here's where we going, line up, beat us. No, it's going to line up. He's going to do it by motion and by scheme. And that's what gives defenses fits. You're going to have the motion across man or zone. You're going to see Herbert pull the ball and throw little pop passes. The offense is going to look a lot more different, but it's a hell of a way more efficient. you saw with Tua, who's just a borderline quarterback, not good, not great, just average to above average, and you see how Pro Bowl type of year he's had and the things that he's been able to do with them because of the perception and what he has and all the different window dressings they do. It gives defensive fits.
Yeah, and I love just keep going, Lo. I could listen to this all day, man. Just you mentioned use check, and I think you look at power football and you look at Scott Matlock, and here's a 315-pound guy, and I love Scott. He bust his tail to try to learn that position, but that's not necessarily, the type of fullback you're looking for. Now, their
Exactly.
tackles, people are like, wow, you got these two tackles, and you got this giant Joe Alt. Joe Alt's an athlete. Joe Alt is going to be fine. I would assume Rashawn Slater is doing backflips right now. If his patella is holding up when I hear he's on schedule. But, you want to talk about a tackle that's excited. Rashawn Slater, and now you've got an interior, and I think we kind of look at that interior three. Look, Zion is supremely athletic and also very large, so he'll be fine, in more of a stretch zone and a wide zone, if that's what, the foundation of the run game is going to be. And you can go out, Bradley Bozeman is not the type of center you'd want. You want someone maybe a little bit smaller, a little bit more athletic. And then obviously Mekhi Becton as well. That's not what you're looking for. So you're probably going to look at new right guard, new center, and I think Zion will probably come down to the number. But man, the tackles. If you were to say, hey, who's the most excited about this hire? I'd say 1, Justin Herbert, 2, Amarion Hampton. Seeing what Achan's doing down
Right.
there, and
Right.
and what McCaffrey's doing in San Francisco, and what he's done with all those backs, and then 3, I think, would be Rashawn Slater. Just how he's built, how athletic he is. When you get him on the move, and you see him cleaning guys out, man, at the next level, I would guess that if you were to talk to Rashawn, he'd probably be just eyes wide. And don't forget, by the way, when McDaniel got the job, I think he took him. Either he took him with him or Frank was already there. But Frank Smith was here with the Chargers in 2021, and that was Rashawn's rookie year. And so I don't know if Frank's going to get an OC gig somewhere else, but I would assume, as when we had the presser with Coach Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz, we asked, hey, you talk about remodeling the house and moving some things, but what about the foundation? Is that foundation of power run game, of gap, and what you believe in, is that? And he said, no, all things on the table, multiple ways to skin a cat. So, and then the follow-up was, because he called the hire, the head coach of the offense, right? I'm hiring the head coach of the offense. And I assume that appealed to McDaniel because he had options. He had the Eagles job. He had the Bucs jobs offered to him. I know that the Lions were kicking the tires on him. So those are pretty impressive freaking jobs with a lot of talent.
Yeah.
He's taken the Chargers because he can build this thing. And when we asked about the, Mike Devlin, the O-line coach, being fired, he just said, look, it's up to the head coach of the offense. If he wants to make some staff changes, he can make some staff changes. So I don't know if Frank wants to be an OC somewhere else. He was the OC, not the play caller in Miami, but he had that title. So I think if you're Frank, and just kind of to I know I'm rambling here, but it's all kind of coming at us a little bit fast. But Frank
Right.
was the O-line coach here in 2021 for Slater's All-Pro rookie season. When he was exceptional, and it looked like the steal of the draft. So if I remember right, I know Corey Linsley was the center, and that was huge because he was arguably the best center in the game that year. But I want to say the majority of the games, Storm Norton was your right tackle. Michael Schofield was your right guard. Who the hell was there? I know there was a free agent left guard. Oh, God, I can see him. He had a huge beard. They got him from Pittsburgh. It was Matt Filer. And that season, with Frank Smith as the head coach, Justin Herbert threw for 5,000 yards.
Wow.
So if you're talking about having that vacancy, and I think there's ways to connect the dots. Look, Mike McDaniel wants to be a head coach again. You heard about how emotional he was when he got fired. So, if this is a one-year thing, you can say, hey, Frank, come with me, get everything set, and then maybe we're going to win a Super Bowl. I'm going to be on my way, get my pick of whatever job I want, and then you can be the OC, and Nick Hardwick can be the O-line coach, and all is well after 1 year. So as you can tell, though, I'm pretty damn excited about this hire. This is the number one guy that I wanted to see get this gig.
Yeah, absolutely. And what they do great, you see more linemen on their feet. You don't see, okay, look, we're just trying to man block and just beat everyone up. It's getting guys, reaching guys, getting guys moving and running, making the defense cover every blade of grass. Now you got to move in and you'll see the inside shoulder. The guys are humping guys and throwing them because of the fact the defenders, they're 200-300 pounds. They're running sideways. Now you're trying to get them to put their foot in the ground and get back north and south. Once you get them moving, you create a new line of scrimmage. You will see this running game, especially with the Marion Hampton, with running behind these big linemen who can create running lanes, but also create space. You're running in motion and you're creating a new line of scrimmage. You can see gashes. You're going to see the bootleg work a lot better. You'll see tight ends. The tight ends, I'm telling you, Rondé Gaston's going to have, you're going to have even bigger because of the drag, how big the tight end is in Mike Shanahan type of offense. And so when you watch McDaniels, what he's able to do with the tight end and with the run game and getting defenders to move, this is going to be exciting times for the Chargers because of the fact this offense is going to be explosive. Because I'm telling you, this offense, it underachieved, and that's why Harbaugh makes the move.
Yeah.
You have weapons. You have receivers. You have running game. You have tight end. You have blocking tight ends. You have talent on this team. Of course, the offensive tackles was a huge blow, not having those guys, for the season. But you have some talent, lots of talent. It's going to be some hard. It's going to be interesting to see who is going to be some new faces on this team, because I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to be a lot of skill players with new faces on this team next year, because the skill positions on this team, they're pretty well set.
Yeah, and look, I think. Well, I'll say this: I think the one thing they will need low at those skill positions. I wonder. I just kind of like I'm looking at the depth chart for
Yeah.
Miami, and I look at that wide receiver group, and I see Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Just straight burners. I mean, burners. And he traded for. Remember when Mike got the job? He traded for Tyreek Hill, and that's what really opened that offense up. Now, Ladd is quick, Ladd is fast, but I wouldn't call him a burner. You know what I mean? Like Ladd is that
Right.
short area quickness. So the one thing I wonder, about is that and that's the thing about the draft, man, and what has become of college football. There are burners up and down the draft. You can get a burner in the third round, in the second round, in the fourth round. You can find those guys, but I just kind of wonder if that's and obviously the fullback, and center. So like what changes? Like if they're going to run, like you look at their depth chart in Miami, right? Alec Ingold's their fullback. He's 6'1", 230. He can move. He's an athlete.
Right.
What's Scott Matlock? 6'4", 315. So like that's something you're looking at and you're like, okay, that doesn't really, and you know what Kyle Juszczyk looks like, right? I mean, it's so athletic. So I think that's probably something you're looking at.
Sure.
Is that where, could Tucker Fisk do that? Yeah,
Sure.
that would maybe, if you want to put Tucker Fisk there, he's not as much of an athlete as Ingold, but he's still, I think, plenty fine. Like you would probably see him take more of those snaps. I think he'd be plenty athletic enough to be moved there if they wanted to do that. And then I'm looking at their center, who's a Pro Bowler this year. He might be. I know he's a Pro Bowler, but I mean, Aaron Brewer is 6'1", 295. That's their center, right? In that scheme. And, you think about Bradley Bozeman at 6'5", 230 or 335, like that ain't happening. That's not what you want at the pivot. And if I go to, and if I go to San Francisco, Jake Brendel, 299, right? So that's to me, that's one where they're going to look at it and be like, okay, this is kind of what you don't need 6'7", 360 Mekhi Becton at right guard. That's not what you're looking for. Because I think before this hire, I would assume every single person's number one free agent was Tyler Linderbaum, and he fits 6'2", 305, and he can move. So he's still fine, even though they're running power out there with Todd Monken and with Derrick Henry in Baltimore. He still fits, but I think there are other options now. And when Mike McDaniel got to Miami, that offensive line was terrible. I mean, it was awful. And what happened? Turns him into a group. He and Frank Smith turn him into a group with Pro Bowlers, 5,000, number one offense in the league in 2023. Talking about 400 yards per game, 30 points per game in 2023. That's what the Chargers are getting.
Yeah, they're getting an offensive minded guy who's going to be able to have guys athletically make them look like Pro Bowlers, and that's what he's been able to do. You see guys, maybe they're not as big and they're not as big, like you talked about Beckin, 6'7", 6'8", 340 pounds. You don't need those type of guys to be successful in this type of offense. McDaniels wants to make sure that he's moving guys vertical. He's also cutting guys off and down blocks and running away from different people. And you want guys that can be able to get out in space and create those mismatches. So you are going to see different. And without a doubt, Madlock probably maybe go back on the defense. And, he was a defensive guy. And
Yeah.
now, so, hey, maybe full time there because you're right. In this type of offense, the way that they have to move, the way that they have to cut back, the front side becomes the back side. A lot of time where the fullback is running out and all of a sudden he's coming back, the wraparound. You have to be able to get skinny and get small and to get back door because of some of the things you're doing in the passing game as well as the run game. Then that's what they do so well. You watch what he does great, McDaniels. It's making the run game look like the pass game. The pass game looks like the run game. So it forces the safety. Sometimes they're down in the box because it looks like run. And okay, there's bombs away over the head. You watch how many plays where you'll see a tight end block down, and all of a sudden he blocks down, and he slipped because it's going to be a boot, the drag. And Gustin is a guy. I know he's not a great run blocker, but when now you're going to have healthy tackle that's going to be out there, and they're tray blocking and they're running wide and pushing, and all it is just holding to your lineman and pushing back on, and then you're going up to the next level. So the blocking is easier, and also those linebackers going to be running the hump because of the fact they're going to be trying to shoot gaps. They're not going to stay play side. They're not going to be so it's going to take a lot of pressure off the run game for some of the tight ends, especially the move tight ends, because of the fact it looks like pass, but it's going to be run. So you're going to be able to anticipate what's going on because you're going to have an advantage as an offensive player.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lo, because I think that's the other position where you have Gadsden. I think Disley's contract is up. I think you're probably, like you said, you're looking at a little bit more. You don't need that giant end of the line. Now, again, this is a guy that I don't think Jim Harbaugh is just going to be like, yeah, totally redo it all. I think he probably still
No,
wants to keep some elements of power football. So
sure.
and again, I think when you look at the Dolphins last year and the year before that, they started to shift. And you're seeing that with McVay. They're running a lot more power than they have in the past, a lot more gap than they have in the past. It's not just straight wide zone that they're running. It's because I think people start to catch up, and you have to be multiple. You've got to be able to just keep a defense on their heels instead of on their toes. So it's going to be fun, man, to watch these two guys really put their heads together and design an offense from the two main schools of thought and merge it into something that I think can just be absolutely beautiful. You look at that Miami game. I was pulling up that box score low because obviously I was there. It was an incredible game. You remember that crazy pass
No,
that
shootout.
Herbert made to set up the game-winning field goal. But that's a game that the Dolphins' 27 points were the third most points scored against Jesse Minter. And they scored 27 points despite Tua throwing 3 picks in that game. They still put up 27. You had Achane going 128 yards, averaging 8 per carry, 2 touchdowns. Like, McDaniel can do it, man. Waddle had 95 yards, averaging 16 per. Ingold, the fullback, ends up getting a huge reception that led to a touchdown. Like, I remember watching it. I can remember. It's funny. I remember that game so well because it's week 6, and the Chargers had just lost to let's see, 3. No, they had lost to the Giants 2 weeks prior, if I remember right, is how that thing went. And that's right. They had lost back-to-back games to the Giants and the Commanders is what it was. And then you go to Miami and, they're not able to take it. I think Gadsden had a big fumble that led to a touchdown. Jesse Minter, we know how special he is, but it just felt like this was one of those where it was a real chess match between Minter and McDaniel, and Tua was giving Minter, everything that he wanted in those interceptions, and then McDaniel's coming right back in this heavyweight bout, and they're trading punches. And on that last drive that looked like it was going to be a game winner, I remember DJ saying, I should get the play-by-play up because it was, just to get specific here.
Right.
Because, yeah, so they score They score a touchdown with 46 seconds left from the 7, 3rd and goal from the 7. And I remember DJ looking at the bunch formation and saying, there is one guy you cannot let out of your sights, and it's Darren Waller. No matter what, that's the guy they want to go to. I guarantee you, not like Jesse Minter doesn't know that. I'm sure he told his guys, hey, one guy you cannot. And what happens, man? They're running all this eye candy before the snap, and next thing you know, Waller's able to just sneak behind this little bunch formation, pop out. Defense gets lost, and he is wide open in the back of the end zone for what looked like was going to be the game-winning touchdown with 40-something seconds left. And everyone's looking at each other like, how did the guy that was supposed to get the ball, that we knew was going to get the ball, get that open? And you said it at the top of the pod, Lo, because sometimes you can scheme it up. Sometimes you can get a schematic advantage and you can get that win. You know, players make the plays, but sometimes the coach can put you in that perfect position to make that play, and that was one of those instances.
Oh, no question. And that's why I talk about all the different window dressing. You got guys, you say, okay, look, you're passing us off. You got the second widest guy. And all of a sudden he's motioning across. And you think he's the second widest guy, but then he motions back inside. So you're thinking you got the second, you're passing off, and you're passing off the space. You're because there's no one there. So they can do so many things that make defense. You're like, where's that guy covering? Where is he covering? But he's out there covering his area instead of saying this area is dead, because the area now has switched to the other half, the other quarter of the field. So if you don't have guys that understand the nuances of that, that's what makes this off. That's what makes this type of offense a nightmare. And that's what you got. You got a Josh McDaniels that is going to be unbelievable, creating mismatches for the defense and for giving the opportunity for the offense to come open. And people are going to be like, how did he do that? Why is this guy open? You know, you're supposed to be covering him. Because of motion and because of window dressing, what you see is not what you get a lot of the times.
I'm pulling it up right now. So yeah, you got Waller, who is outside of Achane comes into the slot. You got Waddle and Hill on the right side of the line, and Derwin's pointing out the protection. He's pointing right at him, and they snap, and Derwin releases him to the safety. And you can just see the leverage. You know, Dayon is following Waddle from the slot. Everyone's confused. And next thing you know, Waller is just like, hey, everybody, I'm just wide open right here. And I remember seeing Waller on a podcast, I want to say, and that play came up, and he said, yeah, I remember the play getting called in, and McDaniel said, hey, if this is the look, I think we're going to get this look. If we get this look, this is the play. This is where you'll go. You'll be wide open. And like when you hear stuff like that, you're just like, yeah, that's it. He just ran right behind Derwin. Derwin passed him off. Molden ends up picking up. Molden couldn't carry him. He couldn't pick him up because he was getting picked essentially. Not a pick play, like it wasn't illegal. I hope this is not too much mumble jumble. But he ends up getting caught between Dayon and Waddle. He just can't get underneath Waller, who swoops right underneath him, and it's just too late.
Because the window dressing, because of you had him, he's not looking, so he's going to go try to play Waller, so he can't get underneath it, and so Waller can outflank him because, like we just talked about.
There we go. We're going to give it to you. So here's Waller right here, right? Waddle, Hill, Achane, I think is right there. So Derwin, Cam Hart, Molden, Tony Jefferson is what we got, right? So here we go. You see Derwin point to him. Here comes Waller, right? Swooping underneath. There's Dayon carrying Waddle. And, Elijah's probably supposed to travel with him. Tony's locked in here. And look where he goes. Look at that.
Wow.
Wide open.
Wide
open. It's what they schemed up.
Because you're and look at wide open. No one's even back there, back in the end zone. He comes down to try to cover. That's what happens when you put your eyes in the backfield and you don't necessarily play your man and play your zone. Flat route, the flat route outflanked as well. All he had to do, he could have threw a backside as well if he wanted to. So yeah, it's great, Mike. It's great. McDaniels is coming to LA. You're going to see an offense that's going to be so much more innovative. You're talking about, man, Low, I'm tired of seeing 8 guys in the box because you're lining up everyone. So everyone's in there. There's no you're going to see guys spread out. You're going to see motions. You're going to see zones. You're going to see motions across, and then they come back across. You're going to see guys motioning and the defense is going to be going all the way across thinking it's man, and then they're going to return back to the same side. Now the defender is still moving because he's thinking he's going across, so now he's lost. This is what you're going to get on a consistent basis. And oh, by the way, this is going to be one of the better quarterbacks that McDaniel has ever had to work with. So you're going to see instant success, in my opinion.
Yeah, you mentioned the quarterback, Lo, and I'm glad you did, because I think about all the options he had, right? He's got the option to go work with Jalen Hurts, two Super Bowls, 1 Super Bowl championship. He's got an opportunity to go work with Saquon Barkley in that offense, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, that offensive line with Lane Johnson and Mailata and that whole crew. Turns that down. He's got a chance to go work with Dan Campbell and Jared Goff and Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta and Penei Sewell and that whole crew, and he turns that down, and the Bucs, with all those weapons, Mike Evans, Godwin, Ibuka, that whole crew, Bucky Irving, that offensive line with Tristan Wirfs, like you've got that in the NFC South, which is absolutely winnable year after year. Turns that down to say, no, this is what we said, we said, this is the best offensive coordinator job out there. Like outside of these guys getting Daboll, we were talking about Daboll or McDaniel. We were like, outside of them getting a head coaching job, they're going to want this one. This is the one they're going to want because of Herbert, because of Slater and Alt, because of Hampton, Ladd. You've got and Harbaugh, most especially Harbaugh, a guy that has won everywhere he's gone, back-to-back 11-win seasons with all of the injuries they had to contend with, still figured out a way to get that victory, and obviously pairing it with a defense that has been dominant the last 2 years. I just pulled up the A-Chan run, and I'm trying to kind of get a look at that now, and to see whether or not. Yeah, here you go, Lo. Why don't you want to do it again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Breakdown again. Here is your formation.
Little 3 down, 4 down.
Little motion there.
Yeah.
And all right, so there's your handoff going to A-Chan, and here he goes. All right, so I'll let it run. And see ya.
Wow. But did you see the biggest play was the motion? When you watch the motion, now watch everyone's watching, watch the backers start switch over. So now you allow the lineman, now the tackle, when he goes down, boom, he's able to scoop block in. Now they're able to get around, pull around. Now the linebacker just following motion. Look how he gets caught up. Look how far he is away from that. Now his angle that he takes is, the third linebacker. Look where he's outplaying space. Exactly.
That's Derwin.
Yeah, and you're out of position. Look at the linebacker, the Mike. He comes over, boom, but they already got him by the motion, by those guys moving. We talk about every blade of grass moving. That's 2 yards. They slide it over. Now the guard's able to come out and pull and get on these guys. You get a body on a body, a hat on a hat. Now you're light over there. It's a man for man. When you're playing defense like that, you had a hat for a hat. There was no extra safety. The safety was playing high. You had nobody. So if guys made their block and you have a back like A-Train, it's off to the races. And that's what you had. Now think if you have a Marion Hampton, the big as he is and as fast as he is, if you have that type of offense and this type of play where the linebackers shuffle over, now you're pulling. That's why you said Becton, 6'6", too big. Now you go get you an athletic guard. Now, when you pull around, because you had a down block, the offensive tackle, able to block down on the defensive end, so you cut the defense. So now the guy on the tackle's been cut. Now the guy that's in the 4-eye that's lined up over the guard, those two guys are dead in the water because the tackle outflanked him and he blocked down. You just removed 2 defensive linemen. Now you're stuck with what? Just 2 backers. The 2 guards pull, guard and center, they pull up. And they take those guys, A-Train's off to the races. That is blocking by great blocking, but that's a great scheme to scheme that open with the motion, getting guys out of position, and that's a home run play.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to have with the Chargers, with Amarion Hampton, with Joe Alt, with Rashawn Slater. You can see why people get excited, man.
Buddy, you're fired up. You're happy than the kid in the candy store. You're just all smiles right now.
This is, I think, I feel like when you have, a defense that's holding a team that averaged 29 points per game to 6 in the first half, and the only reason they got 6 is because of a muffed punt that landed on the Chargers side of the field, or I should say a shanked punt, not a muff punt, but a shanked punt that landed on the Chargers side of the field and gave it a 6-3 lead at that. That's how good the defense was playing. They forced an interception. They forced the ball to hit the ground twice, recovered one at the 10-yard line, and you could only score 3 points, man. It's like this defense is good enough. It's not only good enough, it's way better than good enough. You pair that with an offense that can score points, and we're not talking about first one to 20. We're talking about, hey, is the opponent going to be able to get to 27? Are they going to be able to get there? When you have the weapons that Mike McDaniel will have at his disposal, if that offensive line is healthy, if they fill the holes that I think they're going to fill, you can totally bring back Zion. I think he excel in this game, in this type of scheme, I should say. If you want to do that, I think it depends on where you want to spend your money. If Zion's going to be a $15 to $18 million a year player and Linderbaum's going to be a $17 to $19 million a year player, it's probably hard to pay both of them when you want to bring back, Khalil, Tuli, and Owe all on it. Owe and Tuli getting their big extensions and Khalil getting another year at 15 mil plus. It's hard to do that. So you're probably going to have to pick, do we want to pay the guard or do we want to pay the center? And then, get our guards in the draft or get a center and a guard in the draft and find a less expensive option. I know besides Linderbaum, McGovern's available as well, and he'd probably be a little bit more in that 12 to 15, probably 12 to $14 million range, as opposed to Linderbaum probably resetting the if not matching the Creed Humphrey deal, or surpassing it, because that's just the way these things go. But I think, and look, when Harbaugh was hired, and this is where I credit the Spanoses, when Harbaugh was hired, I'm sure he said, hey, look, I'm going to bring in my D coordinator who's going to want a couple $1,000,000 a year, even though he's never coordinated a defense in the NFL. You're going to have to pay him. I'm going to bring in my strength and conditioning coach who is going to have every college program in the nation after him for at least $1,000,000 a year. This is what my staff's going to cost. I want Mike Elston at D-line. I want Steve Klinkscale. These guys are $1 million coordinators. So it's like, it's not just Jim Harbaugh making 18 to $20 million a year. It's a staff that's probably making another $10 million a year. And now, for McDaniel, I know he's still getting paid by the Dolphins, but whatever, man. And I'm sure he doesn't have offsets in there. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But you're probably talking about the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league. If Chip Kelly got $6 million last year to coordinate the Raiders offense, I'm sure McDaniel's agent is like, yeah, remember that $6 million Chip got? Yeah, that's what we're talking about here, bud. And again, I think it just shows the commitment to winning and how bad the Spanos family wants this, man. They recognize this window with Justin Herbert and how quickly things can change in the NFL. And you see, you've got Patrick Mahomes coming off a gnarly knee injury. You've got the Raiders who are going to be in a full-on rebuild with a number 1 pick at quarterback. You've got a Broncos team that you beat 3 times in a row and held in check. Really, the offense you held to 6 points in that game, Week 18, with all your backups. And I think they look at it and they're like, yeah, we can win the Super Bowl next year. So let's pay this guy, make him the highest paid coordinator in the league, give him $6 million plus per, and let's see if we can. And and if I'm them, I'm saying the same thing to Jesse. Hey, Jesse, I know you're under contract. I know you got the ball. If Baltimore, Pittsburgh, or Buffalo offer him the job, he's going to have to take it. Pittsburgh, you got concerns about quarterback, right? I think that's a legitimate concern at quarterback when you're in a division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. But if you get Baltimore or Buffalo offered to you, especially if you can keep Joe Brady there to call the offense, and you're just going to try to fix that defense for Josh Allen, you got to take those jobs.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about Cleveland, Arizona,
Raiders,
no. I'm like, hey, man, what do you guys want to give me for one more? Can you bump my pay up? No question, man. Here you go. And you'd have Minter and McDaniel. That's when you're really cooking with gas, low.
Hey, that could be special. Yeah, you're putting in your Christmas list in early this year, money.
I'm spending somebody else's money is what I'm doing, Lo.
You're spending it, and you're spending it well. You're doing a fine job finding a way to make sure you over the cap, or you're saying, hey, look, I'm going to break the bank. No, but I totally understand where you're at. When you look at Jesse Minter and what he's been able to do with this defense and the consistency in which they've been able to play. And even when they got, blown out, shellacking by Indy, the way they came back, the visions in which they came back, and he's just got guys playing great. He understands this defense. He understands personnel. Does a great job of getting guys to play above themselves and getting guys to play bigger than what they are. So I think that he's a guy you can't let leave the building. Like you said, be interesting to see what's going to happen, who's going to come knocking at his door. But this is also still an offensive driven league, and that's why you see what Harbaugh did with McDaniels. But you look at what Chicago Bears. Look what they did last season. You look at they were after a offensive minded coach, and look at how well their quarterback played. He went from
Yeah.
being a bust that people said, was this guy? Is he going to be a
Yeah.
bust? What's going to happen when this guy? And you watch the way this kid play, and he has another year. I mean, who knows? I mean, he throws the ball at different angles than Mahomes. I think he's more elusive than Mahomes. When you watch the way he's starting to play under this new tutelage by the coach that they have, you have to have an offensive-minded coach, especially if
Yeah.
you have a quarterback of this talent like Justin Herbert. And so you did that. I don't know if they're going to go defense. I don't know if it's going to be a defensive-minded NFL. Yes, you're going to get some teams that, the Hardball went to the Giants, and he's a defensive and special teams coach, but they love him because of the man that he is and what he's going to bring to the table. He knows how to get offenses going. He knows the right people to bring to his side. So, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Jesse Minter, because the way that the league is, and especially if you got young quarterbacks, they want to make sure you have a great offensive mind to nurture that quarterback.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at it now as you're talking about that low and the offense, and it's like, man, I've mentioned explosive wide receivers, and can you find a burner? Can you find that like true number one? And you think about the quirky person. No, I shouldn't say quirky. Just the, I'll say it. I'll euphemize it. The personality of Tyreek Hill, and what Mike McDaniel was able to do with him and make him the leading receiver in the league, and a guy that was chasing down 2,000 yards and was in the conversation as MVP of the league when they made that trade, and they had the number one offense in the NFL. And if they don't give him the big money offer that he wants, and you can say, hey, man, you want to be the highest paid wide receiver in the league and just pop back into the free agent pool next year, here's 15. Like, the Chargers got $100 million to spend. They can
You
get
think he
creative.
would demand that much after an injury?
No, here's what I'm not talking about Tyreek Hill, though.
Waddle.
I'm talking about George Pickens.
Ooh.
Who's, got a little sideways on the Cowboys there at the end of the year. He's a little wacky, little bit of an enigma. But that's a guy that if he's not getting the number, you call the agent and say, hey, you want to try to get that contract? Come on out here for 1 year. We'll get you 17, 18, 20 million bucks for 1 year. Pop, put some void years on the back or something like that to make it fit into the scheme. And that's what we're talking about. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about, where you could get that legit burner number one. And that would be, and Harbaugh's the kind, look, you know what Harbaugh's like, man. Harbaugh's the kind of guy that can deal with that.
Yeah.
That you think about, now Mike Tomlin's also the kind of guy that could deal with that, and he'd finally had enough. And that's, if Mike Tomlin's had enough of you, that's, there's a reason why Tomlin took on Metcalf, because he was probably like, I can deal with this. Don't worry about it. And it still ended up getting suspended 2 games at the end of the year, and Mike Tomlin has to step down. But to me, that's the one where now they could franchise him, which is probably what they would do, as opposed to just, so whatever that franchise tag is for, let's see what that would be. Franchise tag number for wide receiver. Oh boy. Well, there you go.
What is it? What's the number? You're like, oh boy.
28 million.
I knew you. I heard the oh boy. I heard the oh boy. It's like,
it's that Jamar Chase contract right there, dude. 28 million is the first. So that's what you would have to pay him a minimum of 28 million bucks for 1 year, and that's going to chew up a ton of your space when you're trying to extend. Do a new deal for Derwin, Oweh, Thule, Zion, get a center. Maybe extend Dayon. Like I said, Derwin's new deal. There's,
they're going to give some money. That 28
million bucks.
You can't let that go. Yeah.
But you want to talk about changing the way an offense looks when you get someone like that out there. That's probably
But
not reality. I would assume the Cowboys would just franchise him.
they will, and you got to realize the young receivers that the Chargers got, they can play, and so
Yeah.
you're talking about you got some speed there. They just now it's a huge difference. Look at Q. Look at Q where he went from last year from his second and third and fourth. Look at the difference in play and productivity. So I think when you have a offensive minded coach, McDaniels, what he can do with some of these guys, because you got some guys that has some speed, or they can take the roof off the. Can they do it the way that the guys you're talking about? Of course not. And do it with that swag? Of course not. But I think that if you have the right OC, you got a guy that can get the ball to him. I don't know if I don't.
Yeah.
A perfect world, yes, you
Yeah.
go get him. But I just don't think the price tag is going to match.
No, not. And shame on me for thinking 17, 18. It's 28. That's the floor because that's the franchise. That's what your floor for a 1-year deal would be, is the franchise number. So that's where it would start. And I think teams would understandably be hesitant to make this guy, to pay this guy on the AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, even though that's, the level of his talent. He is in that conversation as that level of wide receiver, but just, the 3 or 4 game stretch where he's doing nothing and pouting
Nothing.
and walking off the field, like
Right.
that's a lot to ask when you're paying
It
someone
is.
that much money. When what a playoff, you do that in a playoff game and it could be the difference in winning and losing. And that's just very hard for a team to take on. And look, I think the Chargers took on a very enigmatic personality in Mekhi Becton. And I think we saw it, show up at various times this season as well. I mean, how does a guy that plays that way and is unavailable as much as he is, complain about his injuries not being dealt with the right way, and at the end of the year saying the scheme wasn't a good fit, and it's just, so that's, I don't know, whatever. That's, shove that aside. Just forget about that. Focus on McDaniel being hired, what this staff could look like, who he might bring in, who might stay. Does Shane Day stay as the quarterback coach? I would guess so. He's Justin Herbert's best friend on the team. And, he worked for Shanahan for 2 years up there in San Francisco. So that's a fit. Again, O-line is open, and I would assume he's going to try to bring Frank with him if Frank will take it, if he doesn't get offered one of these offensive coordinator jobs, or like I said, if you could work something out. Because I think Nick's going to be an O-line coach in this league. I think Nick could be a head coach in this league. Your boy, our guy, Nick Hardwick. I don't think there's any question. And I would hope that he gets this job. And I would hope that McDaniel thinks he's, good enough to, or is he's the guy that he would want to work with. I would absolutely love that. But at the same time, I can visualize this. Hey, give us one more, year, Nick, in your spot. Here's a little extra bump, in pay. And Frank's going to come in. And if everything works out great, Mike's going to be a head coach next year.
Right.
Frank's going to be our OC. You're going to be the O-line coach. And you can just kind of see, because I think I would be very surprised if Frank Smith did not get some OC opportunities with, if Dayball is going to get hired as a head coach, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. If not, he's going to take one of these prime gigs, Philadelphia or Buffalo. And I think, that leaves quite a few. There's still a lot of OC jobs open. Who gets the Raider gig? Who gets the, you got to fill the Bucks. If the Jaguars, if Udinsky is one of these head coaches, now the Jags are going to need an OC. Like, there's a bunch out there that you can go grab and
Tampa Bay,
make a lot more money, and keep that title next to your name. But that's certainly interesting. I mean, we're spinning this thing in a million different ways. You know what we do need to spin, Low? Thoughts on the championship games. Right now, our friends at FanDuel, Seattle's the favorite, followed by the Rams, followed by the Patriots. And obviously, as much as I hate the Donkeys, what a bummer, man, for Bo Nix to break the ankle, man. You hate to see that. Guy plays his freaking tail off in that game against the Bills, and another fourth quarter drive that leads them to victory. Granted, it's 53 yards of PI that end up leading to victory, and Brandon Cooks can't hold on to the freaking ball when he goes to the ground, leading to an interception. And McCole Hardman can't flatten out his route to get in position for a game-winning field goal. But sucks to see that for Bo. And for Jarrett's, that's why they're plus 1,300. But just kind of your thoughts, Lo. Where do you think this thing's going? If you had to pick one of those four, plus 145 for the Seahawks, 210 for the Rams, plus 240 for the Patriots, plus 1,300 for the Broncos. Which way you going?
It's simple. It's Seattle. Seattle, they're the most complete team. Even if the Texans would have made it, the Texans, I like Seattle's defense better. I think that in their offense is way more consistent. I think after that, you look at the Rams. The Rams would be if they found a way. It's definitely, I believe, the NFC wins the Super Bowl without a
Yeah.
doubt. But it's Seattle. Seattle's offense, they can run the ball. Your quarterback doesn't have to go and be great. Your defense plays lights out. They play all three phases. Look at their special teams: home run hitter, kickoff return. Look at the way their special teams fly around to the ball. They're a buttoned up team. Seattle will win the Super Bowl, and I don't think anyone's going to stay within 7 to 10 points
Oh,
from
wow.
here on out. I don't think there's a 2-point game or a 5 field goal last minute. If they play the way that Seattle's capable, they're running away with this thing.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me. I think I'd probably right now it's Seattle by 2.5. So you get a field goal to be at home. So a lot of people like the Rams. I could totally see McVay. You think about those two games, right? The first one in LA was a slugfest. Yeah, I think it's 21-17 Rams won. And then the second one, they were blowing the Seahawks out.
Yeah, they
Darnold was
were.
having a miserable game, and then all of a sudden it just clicked and they started, and I do think the way that the way the Bear game played out, I think woke up McVay. I think McVay got cute. They were running the heck out of the ball between the tackles. You were talking about it with Shanahan, and against Minnesota and running the ball 40 times. Like they could have done that and they could have won that game by 2 touchdowns. But for
Yeah.
whatever reason, man, they got away from it. And you got all these, 3 straight passes, 3 and outs. You open that door for the Bears to get back into the game, and the Bears should have won that game, man. It was a beautiful. I went back and watched the play, man. It was such a perfect play drawn up by Ben Johnson on the interception, and freaking Dante Moore. I mean, I'd love to know, Lo, what's it like on the sideline when you got a perfect play draw? Adunze and Moore are just stacked, and Adunze clears it out, man. He takes both safeties, and there is 20 yards of grass wide open between the safeties and the linebacker level. They're in quarters coverage, and all Moore has to do is freaking dig and cut that thing across, and he just lazily is just drifting. And Curl sees it. He hands Adunze off to Lake, and just you can't let a deep safety beat you to the ball, man. He breaks on the ball and picks it off. Otherwise, that thing is going to be sitting at the 28, 26-yard line for a game-winning field goal. I mean, when it's a game like, and look, Moore has been fantastic all year. He's a number 1 receiver in the league. Like, what happens on a team when something like that goes down? When you watch a playback and you're like, come on,
Yeah,
really,
you know
man?
what? Yeah, I got Ron McCree on the phone. You remember just fall down and the game's over. We beat, this
Yeah,
Indianapolis don't win a Super Bowl. Peyton Manning doesn't get that Super Bowl.
yeah,
We're way better. Guys do sometimes. Guys just get lazy and they take a mental play off. You saw several of those interceptions. The other one with you watch the receiver thinks it's man coverage. I mean, he thinks it's man zone coverage instead of they're playing man zone. And if he breaks out, the DB has to stay on him. Instead, he goes in and he's able to pass him off, and then the quarterback lays that corner out in there, and the DB's throwing it. Like, where's the quarterback throwing it? Well, dumbass, all you have to do is run a stop route and turn out. The DB can't slough off. He can't pass you off in the middle. And that's what receivers, when you're running a route, you read your way out. When you're running, is okay. What are they playing? Okay, this is zone. I got to turn out. If I turn in, I'm running into another zone where now I take the responsibility off. So you're telling guys, okay, boom, he turns out on that. That corner route is a beautiful play. You got another at least in field goal range. Instead, you're turning the ball opposite way. So guys have to look at themselves and say, hey, look, critical mistakes. And have I made them before? Absolutely. Everyone has made them before. Josh Allen, has an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. This is the first time all the quarterbacks are not there. You're the dominant guy. You should have won that game. You had it. You said, okay, get to overtime. You did. Now you have a chance to finish it. You throw a ball underneath, throw a ball. You get kind of tight, put some air on that pass. Don't make it that hard. You win that game. You're going to get that field goal. You're going to kick a field goal. And Josh Allen's probably getting in the Super Bowl. So guys do it, but when you look at that, the film tells the story. You don't have to necessarily beat up guys because they know when they watch that film, man, I was one of
It's
the reasons
coming.
we lost.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bummer, but like you said, I mean, my gosh, it's 60 minutes. In that case, it's 70 minutes of football in 2-degree weather. It's hard to fault anyone what a nightmare that is, sitting out there
Yeah,
trying to freaking keep things going and catch balls when your hands are frozen. Not easy. But it's what we're looking at. So New England is a 5.5-point favorite, according to our friends at FanDuel, at the Broncos. I still think that Broncos defense can give them fits, man. Drake May
so do
put that
I.
ball in harm's way a lot in
He
that game
does.
against the Texans. CJ Stroud just handed it right back to him on a freaking silver platter. Boy, did he play a terrible game.
Horrible.
Yeah, so that's one where like I could see, the Broncos won a bunch of games this year, 13-10, 10-7. Like that to me is still in play.
I agree.
That's a pot that Sean Payton's as good as feelings aside, he's a brilliant play caller and seems to have the answers to the test far more often than not. That could come up with a few things, just run the hell out of the ball. If JK just had his window reopened, so he could be out there with RJ Harvey as a 1-2 punch in that in that offense to run it. And boy, I could see it. I can still visualize the potential of somehow the Broncos getting there. I don't think it would make for a great Super Bowl. I think you go up against the Seahawks or Rams, and you're going to get your doors blown off.
Right.
I almost feel like that for either team. I wouldn't be surprised if the Super Bowl is going to be like 7+ in favor of the NFC, but going to be some good games. Lean on our friends over at FanDuel. Get part of that. Well, Lo, I have been exuberant enough. I have been pie in the sky, Pollyanna.
You've
I
been
can't
on
wait.
the it's Christmas came early for us, and I got your wish
Yeah,
list. I know what you want, and we'll
yeah,
see if it happens.
exactly, Lo. We're excited. It was a disappointing end of the season, but you tip your cap to Coach Harbaugh, who's done things one way his whole career. And it just shows you a commitment to winning and recognizing that okay, who's left in the Super Bowl? You got Sean Payton, who's schemes it up, gets the offensive advantage, right? That's an offensive leaning team. It's the Rams, it's Sean McVay, it's an offensive leaning team. It's the Patriots, it's Josh McDaniels, and it's Drake May MVP candidate. Now, don't get me wrong, that defense has been really good, but you'd still say, yeah, I mean, look, Drake May's going to be the MVP, man. The guy freaking threw for 4,500 yards, and you've got these two backs that got 15 touchdowns between them rushing. So I think that's an offensive leaning team. At the very least, you'd say Josh McDaniels is probably a top 8 play caller, top 5 play caller in the league. So I think you look at it and you're like, okay, we gotta, as much as I want to play this thing in a phone booth and beat the snot out of our opponent, you got to kind of recognize where the team's going, where the trend is going. And I commend Harbaugh for doing that, for just turning control of that offensive side of the ball over to Mike McDaniel. And I commend the Spanoses for spending what I'm guessing is a pretty healthy chunk of money to get the most desirable OC candidate out there to turn down head coaching jobs. Like, think about that. This guy could have popped right back in and been a head coach again. And he's like, no, nope, I'm good. I'm gonna go be an OC for a year,
Wow.
because at least a year, because of what I see in front of me. So it's to me, it's a very exciting day.
Yeah, and it's just going to make more. It's going to make it more desirable. And like you said, now you have a healthy Charger team coming into this next year's season, and with the weapons that they have, and with the new offensive coordinator, I think he's making a fabulous choice because he's going to be one of the most sought after coaches after the year, especially if the Chargers do what we think they can do with this OC.
Yeah, I'll just end it with this, Low, because I want to make sure I do know next year is going to be a 2026 opponents. Next year is not going to be easy. Obviously, you got the division. We already talked about that, but you're playing the AFC East. So you got the Patriots and the Bills, with Josh Allen. You've got the NFC West. So you've got 3 playoff teams in the 49ers, the Rams, and the Seahawks. You're playing the Buccaneers. You're playing the Baltimore Ravens. So it's a schedule where you're probably gonna have to score some points. And man, I feel so much better about what this thing's gonna look like, compared to compared to what it could have looked like with anybody else. And you know what? If Mike McDaniel decides to take a head coaching job because it's not officially official yet, let me load a little
let's
stuff here.
see.
Let's just see. Let's just make
You
sure.
you got the fans all fired up. He can't do that now.
Right. Let's see. I got nothing here. Let's go to Adam Schefter on Twitter and see what he's got going. Let's see. Gosh, where are you? Here we go. Not seeing any update compared to, I think it's still just that one tweet. Bills, not seeing that. GM. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything making it
official.
So still in that range of more about the Chargers being expected to hire Mike McDaniel. That's where we're still at as we finish this. So let's just make expected. As Lindsay says, no announcement. I've got my notifications on. Thank you, Lindsay. Much more efficient than me searching Twitter for everybody. That's how we're going to close this thing out. Appreciate y'all, everybody. It'll be official next week. We'll continue the Love Fest and be excited about where this thing is headed. Lowe's, great to have you back, man. Hope wherever you were was great. I think you're in Florida or something like that. So we'll knock it out again next week.
We'll do it. Bolt up, baby. Bolt up.